Pope Paul II, nicknamed Handsome, and criticised for effeminate dress and mannerisms.
Let's bring it back to Pope Francis. Hi, I'm Andy.
And I'm Roger.
And welcome to The Middle,
where we try to have thoughtful conversations
about awkward topics
on our search to find the middle.
We're going to give you last week's news today.
That's a slogan we should put on a t-shirt.
Stop touching her!
I am tonight announcing my candidacy.
Taylor Swift. Look, my biggest issue with marriage is that I think that it's a fundamentally flawed institution that is built on the oppression of women.
I will not be lectured about sexism and misogyny.
Having truly rational conversations about controversial issues is risky these days.
Roger.
Andy, how you doing?
The Pope is dead. Holy smokes.
Holy smoke indeed. What does the smoke signify? I thought the smoke was when they selected a new one.
Yeah, so I think it's grey every time they fail to elect the new Pope and then it's white.
White smoke,
I think,
yeah.
Or vice versa. I'm pretty sure it's white when they elect the Pope to represent purity of the virgin nature of the untouched 75-year-old who's just been elected Pope.
Nice, nice.
I mean, we were talking about virgins the other week.
Exactly where I was going to. Do you think the Pope's a virgin?
There's a right answer in inverted commas, and then there's the answer I really want to give to that question.
Come on, give it to me. We can cut it out later.
Which hole counts?
Well, any orifice I think counts, right? It's
So-
good. Let me ask ChatGPT something right now. So, if you are Catholic, what is considered a virgin? In the Catholic teaching, virginity is primarily understood as a physical and moral state, but it also can be spiritual and symbolic. Okay, so there are two types. Physical virginity, this usually refers to someone who has not engaged in sexual intercourse, typically defined as vaginal intercourse between a man and a woman. See? There you go. So it's man and woman, vaginal, it's just the vajayjay, okay? Moral and intentional aspect. Catholic teaching also considers the intention and will behind sexual behavior. If someone has maintained chastity and not consented to sexual activity, they are regarded as having preserved their virginity in a moral and spiritual sense.
Okay.
So
All right,
that's a good little addition.
Well, the reason, just to be clear, the reason I kicked us in this direction was because in 2019, in the book In the Closet of the Vatican, French journalist Frédéric Martel estimated that approximately 80% of the Vatican's clergy, including cardinals, were actually gay. Like 80%. So you can no wonder they don't want to let women in.
Yeah. I must admit, I went down a bit of a ChatGPT rabbit hole on the popes, where I was looking up the different popes, and it landed me into a deep dark corner, or a pink corner rather, that was asking, what is the real evidence around the gay popes? So there's a list of popes that are suspected or rumoured to have been homosexual, and do you want me to read the list?
How much time do we have?
Let's just say... Okay. Just as a bit of fun, right? So, what nationality represents the gay popes, if you had to guess? What breakdown?
Well, Italian.
So you're going whole salami or Italian?
Well, I don't know what you mean. Sorry, what's the question?
So, like out of all the popes there's ever been in history, and we take the subsection, the pie chart of them, of which are gay or rumored to be gay. What's the ethnic breakdown?
Well, I don't know what you mean though, because most of the popes in history would have been Italian.
Well, yeah, most of them, but not all of them. Like, so...
Well, the majority.
The majority, but there's been, 16 French popes, 6 German, there's been 5 Syrian, by the way, 4 Greek, 3 African. There's been a whole lot of different things.
Well, going by the 80% figure, I'm pretty sure that...
All right, fine.
I'm sticking with 80%.
The Italians did invent the 80-20 rule, right? They were the original incels. No, I'm kidding. Anyway, I'll push out any misery. Out of all the notes and reason for speculation about popes being gay, they're 100% represented by Italians. And they're often accused by very prominent people in the clergy and in the Italian government. So some, like Pope Benedict the IX, was accused by contemporaries, including St. Peter, of sexual debauchery and hosting orgies with references to homosexual acts, and he was known as one of the most scandalous popes. And then Pope Paul II, nicknamed Handsome, and criticized for effeminate dress and mannerisms.
All right. Well, let's bring it back to Pope Francis. So,
Argentinian,
so
right?
Yes, the Pope is dead. I must admit, for his own sake, I'm glad for him that it didn't, like, I don't think it was necessarily a sudden end, but it wasn't as drawn out as John Paul II.
Yeah.
Which just like the I mean, you know, when you're the subject of a South Park cartoon that you're really pushing the envelope. So you maybe 1-2 years where he was not quite 100%, but seemed to do okay up to then. I mean, at the end of the day, I'd die too if I had to meet JD Vance in the in the morning. So yeah. So what did you reckon about that whole weird, like, you saw the video of them meeting, right?
I did, yeah.
It was a bit awkward, wasn't it?
It was very awkward. But at the same time, I think, you know, he was obviously very, very ill. Probably didn't have much energy. You know, there's a language barrier. Yeah. So I think all of those things cloud it a little bit. You know, there are some accounts that actually Vance got a bit of a talking to, especially around the immigration, and some rumors that perhaps the meeting was under a bit of tense pressure from the popes and the Vatican side. That's all hearsay, I guess. But yeah, apparently he was Vance was left with some advice, pretty much to put the humanity back into some of the immigration practices, or to represent Catholics in that way.
Yeah, so you know what that reminded me of? That reminded me of you know, you remember like Hector Salamanca from Breaking Bad, you know, the guy in the wheelchair with the bell, like the ding 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 thing, right?
Yeah.
It just reminded me because of that scene where he's with like Hank and Gomes at the, you know, old folks' home, and they're trying to, like, you know, get information about freeing, and, you know, they're trying to investigate, and they go and interview, you know, Hector, and and then like these cops are interviewing this guy who's, you know, incapacitated, but he finds the courage to stick his finger up at the cops, and I was just waiting for like the Pope to do that to JD Vance, like.
Okay. Well, obviously Pope Francis was considered, you know, in the grand scheme of things, quite a progressive pope, right? And has been openly critical of the United States and some of their policies. So I think that that's also in the backdrop, right? And you know, you can't say that the Catholic Church is I suppose, you know, from a cultural capital point of view, is trending down as well. So I think that there was a lot of things going into that meeting, and, you know, hate is going to hate, and JD makes it easy to hate him at the moment. So it did feel very tense, though. But no, I mean, I don't make a habit of watching these exchanges. But yeah, and in the context of him passing away shortly after. So
I think what was amazing about that meeting is that clearly only one side wanted to meet the other. So this was clearly like JD Vance, like it was almost like he's got his like hall pass from the president for the weekend. He said, "Oh, please let me go to the Vatican to meet the Pope. Please, Daddy, let me out." And
puppy,
he's been given like the weekend to fly to Rome, to the Vatican, to see the Pope. He's got this like almost giddy kind of, like, you can tell JD Vance was like a puppy dog in there, right? And like it's so good to see such an arrogant motherfucker get nothing back. Like, I mean, of course, because the guy's on his deathbed, but like, but like, just get no, even the shitty tie that they get, like they gave him some shitty Vatican themed tie, which is, it looked like it was made in China, like the irony of, and there's like these chocolates. I hope you declare it on your way home to apply the 35% tariff you've just applied to us, you know, and you contrast that meeting with, say, the Zelensky meeting or whatever.
Yeah.
And it really underscores just how influential and actually powerful the Catholic Church can be at a time like this, like where whoever the replacement of whoever the new pope will be, right? And so they reckon it could be this I don't know how to say it, but this Parolin guy, right, who's the current Secretary of State of the Vatican, the equivalent of the most senior sort of leader of the Vatican as a political rather than a spiritual institution, so the second in command kind of thing. That he's a front runner, but like he's got very like intimate knowledge of the conflicts in Ukraine, in the Middle East, and very outspoken on matters of immigration, refugees, and humanitarian causes. And if you've got like a VP that maybe I'm just like naively holding onto some optimistic thread of hope that if he genuinely is a person of faith, sincerely in the way that he portrays himself as, that maybe they can cut through in a way that no one else can. I don't know.
Possibly. Yeah, I think that he is a man of faith, but is probably clouded by the fact that he has faith in himself above all else. So, that's a hell of an ego to contend with. But yeah, look, I think a line coming from the Pope saying you need to do a better job, well, essentially reading between the lines, you need to do a better job representing Catholics on the global stage. I think that's going to, if that doesn't do it, what's going to do it? You know what I mean?
I think JD Vance is also slightly has vibes that, like, if he doesn't like the message he's getting from the Catholics, he's as likely to like quit and go and join the Southern Baptists. Like,
yeah, the boys got options. He's Southern, right? The boys got options. They would love that scalp in the Hillsong for sure.
Do you so like we've talked a little bit about religion, and I think neither of us believe in the Bible as it's or that there's genuinely this divine figure of God as it's sort of described in Christian doctrine or whatever, right?
Well, used to.
But not anymore, right? So we're on the same page in terms of that. But like, I've had a bit of a warming to the notion of like trying to find the value in it, like even if you don't necessarily believe it. So apart from like at an institutional level, like the let's say the child sex abuse stuff, or even just indoctrination, brainwashing, and some of the maybe like the acts of harshness that the Catholic institutions have committed, but at least like at a doctrinal level, or trying to maintain institutions of like family and kind of they've done a lot of, maybe they take that and they take it too far. Like they're famously influential in terms of like policy, like reproductive rights and things like that, where they impact other people who aren't of a faith. But yeah, I mean, like if you're gonna be religious in 2025, like isn't it more fun to be Catholic? Like wouldn't it be more fun to like revel in the institution and the ornaments of religion that Catholicism has? Like there's just something hollow about going to church in an industrial estate and then go to McDonald's afterwards for soft serve ice cream. Like,
okay, so I see what you mean. I do resonate with this idea of the grandeur, the history of Catholics. They're taking it seriously. They've, it's intertwined with culture and history, and they take it seriously, right?
Politics too, right?
Everything, like, it is the heart of a lot of, modern expansion. But I don't know whether that line of like, are you having more fun as a Catholic actually stands. Because I think that I do understand this whole thing of like going to Hillsong and then getting a latte at the Gloria Jean's down the road in the car park. I get that. There's a very vivid memory, but the Catholics are very repressed, right? So I think that they have this weird kind of sidelining of their religion and the duty around it. And out in the Western world, I don't know how well that reflects. I think that the Protestant tradition is probably more fun because it's all about your personal relationship with God. It's all about community. You got Christian rock. You've got you got so many things. It's like the American sweetening of the diet, right? These mega churches, this kind of, this youth programs, everything is on steroids. It's like they've made it as easy as possible, like diabetic even, to ingest this form or this strain of Christianity. And there's the evangelical aspect to it as well. Like I think that Catholics, it's a very private thing. It's, you confess in a dark box, you feel guilt, you get on, you compartmentalize. But the Protestant and the evangelical faith is all like, it's out there, you're out there with the pavement, you're trying to convince people, like the Bible studies, and the drummer on the stage has a bunch of stuff. The pastor's got a Madonna mic and he's like pacing back and forth like Tony Robbins, like I don't think you can compete with that.
The closer you get to like more traditional, like Catholic, Orthodox kind of versions of Christianity, the more important like doctrine is, right? The more important like the rules of the game are. Like it's like I just find these other like these kind of new wave evangelical churches just too like they're like jelly. Like they can be whatever you want it to be. Like it's just whatever you want Christianity to be, it can be that to you if you want. Whereas I think when you get to like Catholicism or like Orthodox versions like of Christianity, it's no, this is what we believe. Like we've spent centuries debating this. Like this is and like Pope Francis was actually very unpopular within the Catholic Church because conservatives didn't like the change that he brought, like the modernization that he brought. And there's this whole schism of like conservative Catholics and kind of the more progressive side. So, and I think protecting that like means as a, now, like, of course, this is if you believe in it, but to us, we just sort of laugh at them for it sort of almost. But I just think there is something more disciplined about being a Catholic in that you actually value what you actually say you believe in. Like you actually respect it enough not to just like kind of have this, we'll play whack-a-mole on what we actually believe. And I'm just going to like every time you raise a criticism with someone about their religion that they just come back to you with some, oh, well, actually, no, it's not, I don't actually really believe in that. I believe in some other, whereas Catholics are like, no, like we believe in that and we've been debating it for years. And
I think that, again, I appreciate the sentiment, but my experience with with Catholics, and I've had a few run-ins with going to Catholic Mass and things like that, and on the Latin side, and other things like that. So Filipinos, basically. I find that, yes, they don't have the same attitude of wild interpretations that can easily meld into the modern, like modernity and modern progressive values. But what they do to essentially get in the same way, in a very practical way, or cope with this type of ancient religion in a modern time, is they use a form of what I was referring to, like the compartmentalization that a Catholic does, where, okay, yeah, they might believe that it's wrong, like sodomy is wrong or whatever, or, butt play is wrong, but they just do it and then they ask for forgiveness.
Why did you have to use that as the example?
Because it's so widespread. Going back to the whole virginity thing, it's a grayer area or a browner area. All right. Coming back to it, the Catholic way is actually like, it's a very practical existence where you compartmentalize your religion, because it's saying that we all sin. I'm going to continue sinning, but I'm going to pay for it. I'm going to repent. I'm going to confess. I'm going to do the punishment.
All you have to do is go to church once a week.
But that's what I mean, right? So like in that way, that is a form, instead of like trying to say, oh no, look, this is all interpreted. I can actually have tattoos, even though the Bible says I should mark my skin. They just get, the Catholic will get the tattoo and then they'll confess about it and then they'll try to make good for it, and over we go. So it's all a way of trying to fit these very ancient Bronze Age doctrines into a modern world. And I feel like the Catholics just take an approach of shame, guilt, and active repentance after the fact of the sin, whilst the modern day Christians and the Protestants actually weasel their way out of it through an interpretation.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things that forces at play too, right? Because I think generally speaking, I think historically evangelical churches have been better at attracting new people because they've been able to sort of meet the market, right? So they tend to almost have people who have come into the faith and have embraced it, or at least they've molded to the community, right? Whereas, like, whether we're talking about like an Orthodox church or a Catholic church, or whatever, they're not interested in that. It's like, no, you got to come to meet us. Like, if you want us, like, we're not changing for you. You got to come to us. So, but like the flip side is you've got a lot of people who've born into these kind of churches, right? These, and maybe they're culturally Catholic, but not Catholic in the same way as a member of like an evangelical church would consider themselves Christian. Like, they're not passionately Catholic in the same way as And so then it's like, all right, how can I be culturally Catholic and like meet the requirements of what I'm supposed to do so I don't disappoint, you know, everyone around me. And so then people get into these, and it does let you do that, right? There's something sort of geeky about it. Like, and I think there is a contrast to draw.
Yeah.
Like, I think you can say, like, there's, you know, most Catholics are not like this actually because they're born into it, or they're culturally of that distinction. But for those who kind of like geek out on this stuff, like, it's amazing to like be exposed to some of the, like, they're going back to like, you know, Vatican I, Vatican II, like the history of like how they kind of.
And that's the draw too. If you're a Catholic, you actually are a part of history.
And the politics. Oh, come on. Like, has any part of you ever like thought, oh, wouldn't you be like such a mad dog, like flying into Rome airport as a cardinal with your little red cap, like,
yeah, you got that.
Getting
ruby.
driven to the Vatican to your like old school like palace.
They're gangsters, man. Like they got the ruby on the finger, on the pinky. You know, that they're dripping with. The Catholics have the best gold. You'd be like, they're just like, they're revered. But again, look, what I would say too, I think, is that they had this thing, right? So I draw back this vivid memory of being part of a youth group, and it was a Protestant, or let's say Anglican, right, where youth group when I was younger, maybe when I was, I don't know, 13, 14 years old. And there was this whole segment on this idea about being Jesus plus, right? And the idea was that if you are a Christian, if you're a Protestant, you believe the Bible.
That's $30 extra a month, is it?
Let me get there. So you believe the Bible, right? That's the doctrine. You believe in Jesus. And anything more is Jesus plus. And you have to hold yourself accountable to that. So, for example, you know, like, I'm a Christian, so I have to wear this cross. I have to wear that, like this gold cross. And I was like, no, you just need Jesus. That's Jesus plus. And there's no religion that's more plus than the Catholics, because they don't just rely on the Bible. They do believe on that. And it's like, no, you know, I need the Pope hat, I need the bling, I need the smoke coming out of the, you know, off the tabernacle. And so that's why, like, I think Protestants are more of a Spartan type thing, because they just believe in the doctrine. Everything else is Jesus plus. So they kind of have this message that all the other fancy things around it. It isn't,
though, right?
But it's true that if you follow that logic, like from a rationality point of view, a lot of Catholic rituals and all these rites and things like that have been made up on top and have been built on top of the doctrine. No one has, like, that's part of the Vatican doing that. They're making it. They're actively building that curriculum and these kind of rituals and what you can pay for and how you can get to heaven and all this kind of what's right. Like, there's no part of the Bible that says that women can't be part of the clergy. It's something that's decided by the organization, the Catholic organization. So that's what they mean about that.
A lot of those things are cultural, right? They come from
they are now, but they said you had to back in the day, right? Like,
well, yeah, but you know, like, the Anglican Church wasn't. I mean, you only need to see the coronation of King Charles, and the church, the head of the Church of England is the monarch, and most of those rituals and they're quite silly rituals when you think about it, that occur during the coronation are actually connected with the godliness of the head of the monarch, right?
Or even university graduation ceremonies. Have you ever, like, seen the guy carrying the wizard mace and, like, they're all in gowns?
Yeah, but like, that's of a time, right? So I think that's just what they did back then.
I don't know. Macquarie Uni was only founded like a couple of years ago. So
yeah, but they've got the lighter touch version. But you know, like, there's a certain,
we need more velvet.
And then of course, like, it's a selling point. It's like partly marketing, right? It's like, there's nothing, like, what message are you going to emphasize to a bunch of, like, teenagers, right? Is it that, hey, we're cool, like, that's why we dress like fucking bishops, you know, like, that's not a cool thing, right? Like, the image of, like, a elderly man in a white, you know, cape and wearing a cap or whatever isn't appealing. But hey, the youth pastor who, like, goes surfing, you know, on the weekends in his, like, you know, his hipster kind of,
but it's the supernatural aspect too that is really interesting to me. Like, where the Catholics do, you know, saints, or they, you know, they ordain the miracles in the Vatican, where, you know, there's a part of the Vatican, like, inside the Vatican, there is a whole department that ratifies miracles. You know,
Yeah,
like,
but isn't that like
no, it's
extra
like,
layers?
It's Harry
like,
Potter stuff, right? Like I love it.
I feel
How do
like
you
we're
get on that
comparing,
team? I want to get on that team.
but I feel like it's like we're comparing the world of Tolkien and, you know, Star Wars, where they've got all these like characters and like a really rich like world to, you know, something like, you know,
my parents were part
Futurama,
of,
you know?
My parents were part of planting a few churches. And let me say, when you go to the Vatican, you didn't have to go to the Vatican, but when you go to Italy and you sit in some of these, you know, these chapels and these churches, and you feel the energy, the aura, like there's a feeling in the air, there's the art, there's the gothic nature of it all. And then you come back to Australia and you are in a primary school that has rented you out their school hall for church service on Sunday. It just doesn't have the same pop. I get it. But hey, I want to ask you a question. You are culturally Catholic, right? Do you still feel like when you watch something like Passion of the Christ, the Mel Gibson movie, do you feel anything?
I feel deep hatred to the Jews.
But seriously, like, I remember watching that Passion of the Christ. At the time, it was very culturally impactful to see like someone getting tortured like that in high def in a cinematic way.
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't think that had anything to do with a religious connection to it. But like, just to be clear, I did advance in the what do they have in Scientology? They have level. What do they call it? The when you get to level 10 or whatever. I don't know what the equivalent.
You need to like ridding yourself.
No, it's like it's like you get to learn various parts of the story, no matter like as you progress through the levels, like in Scientology. Anyway, so I grew up Catholic, and when I say grew up Catholic, it wasn't just like culturally Catholic. Like I went to church. I did the scripture. I went to the special scripture offshoot for Catholics. I went through the communion, like first communion, like where you go and they teach you all these.
Was your particular service you drank from the communal cup and they wipe it with the robe, or did they give you a shot glass?
No, it was just the they didn't do the wine. There was just the
cracker,
like the little wafers, things. Yeah. Anyway, but that's as far as it went. It didn't go beyond that. So, and I think, to be honest with you, the only reason I probably went through that first communion thing was because of not wanting to sort of disappoint my grandma more so than any other kind of, like, I don't think my parents.
Can I ask you a question about Catholic Mass though? You know how like when you go to Catholic Mass, they have a lot of like question answer, like when I say Tupac, you say Biggie, Tupac, Biggie, Tupac, Biggie. And everyone obviously knows what to do, right? Like, so the priest is saying things and the congregation answers in all these different statements, right? How do they teach that to the young kids? Do you just absorb it through osmosis, or do they actually?
You just sit there bored shitless for an hour, and then you.
Because I attended one, like, and I obviously didn't know all the returning responses when you meant to say in the gap, and so
it's so long since I've been, but I don't know what to overstate how Catholic I was growing up. Like, as in,
did you confess?
I did go through that as part, because you have to do that as part of like first communion, right? So,
what did you confess?
I think my mum told me to make something up. It was one of those weird sort of experiences that I could. But do you know what? Like I as I said, like I don't believe it, so it's hard to kind of entertain the thought of like. And I think you've touched on this as well, like how you can just sort of go like just for the social side of it. Like it's a pretty like heavy thing to go sit through just for the soft serve McDonald's trip with your mates afterwards. Like, so I think like on that level, Catholicism is less suitable for people who just want to go for the community of it. Like,
it's a private thing, isn't it? Like, I feel like the Catholics are very private about their faith.
But still, like, I do have like some fond memories, right? Not of the church itself necessarily, but like maybe it's like some of the families that I knew growing up who were Catholic, and just how sincerely they sort of felt about it, and how they kind of engaged with it and took it seriously, and what they seemed to get out of it. So I can't knock it, right? I can knock the actual belief and say I don't believe I think it's kind of, and the institution's been quite flawed, right? Like, so definitely at that level, but I'm not 100% like, oh, I'm so glad, I'm out of that thing, right? Like, there's part of me that's like, yeah, it serves a purpose for some people.
It's a tricky one, especially with the Catholics, because it's the ultimate turn a blind eye, we don't talk about it situation, and all the abuse and everything. But look, I think that for all of Christianity, I think the tenets there, we don't think of it in this way now, but it's the solution to so many of the world's problems. Like, if the Christians in America were just acting like how they should, none of this would be happening, right? This like idea of forgiveness and the last will be first, and not to turn the other cheek, and all these kind of things that are not being followed by Trump.
Isn't it hilarious that they'll get triggered over, in America, anything that's perceived as being anti-Christian, and then in the process of being triggered will act wholly unchristian? Like, it's just
I feel for them though. Like, I actually really feel for that Christians, like the average Christians in the United States, because I'm not talking about Christian nationalism and all that kind of other fringe stuff. I'm talking about trying, like you said, being sincere about your faith, trying to follow this idea. And abortion, like the abortion, the Roe versus Wade thing was a really clear example, where here they are presented with a binary choice. We have a two-party system. The orange guy is going to give me what I believe serves my faith, but what comes with that is a whole lot of immorality and conflict with all the things that I just mentioned around, forgiveness, you're not decimating your enemies, and all this kind of other stuff that is antithetical to you. But you've been forced to make that deal with the devil, right? And now it's become even more insidious and cultural, and it's a war on it, right? And it's a culture war.
Someone like a Mitt Romney, who's Mormon,
yeah,
but like,
he's the real deal,
would have those same. In fact, there's probably no like very prominent sort of US political figure, but it's probably more notable that he's a Mormon. But like, like that's unusual, right? But but like, I think the Mormons, like I was reading this piece on how Mormons, like in particularly in like say Utah, for example, they're very pragmatic, and there's a certain grace that they bring to their engagement with politics. There's a certain, your faith has to trump, no pun intended, any like faith trumps politics, right? And that doesn't mean making these like selling your soul to the devil for like abortion control. It means no, you've got to like be true to yourself, and so someone like Mitt Romney can't get on the Trump train because he can't live with himself.
No, and it's very
like
that. The Christian faith is very Kantian, right? Like, it's very, no one is a means to an end, right? Everyone deserves that individual dignity. That's definitely part of it, right? And Mitt Romney, absolutely, he's the real deal when it comes to these Christian values, but he was never an option. He was never an option. Like we've said before, politics is a game of addition. There's no way someone like Romney is going to be able to galvanize the country and get enough votes.
Well, I don't think that's necessarily what I was trying to say, but it was just more that, like, if you're sincerely of faith in America, it isn't a hard choice, because I mean you were framing it as it's a hard choice. Like, do you go for this guy who's going to do this thing in this one area? It is a hard choice
to vote for a Democrat.
I don't think it is. I think if
you're... Very hard choice. These things are not aligned to Christian values.
Well, of course they are. I mean, Democrats are the party of compassion far more than... I mean, whatever the opposite of compassion is, that's what Donald Trump's about, right? And the Democrats are the party of compassion. So on like probably the only issue you can
compassion or cancel?
No, genuine compassion.
Come on, they went off the rails, mate. Like,
yeah, they went off the rails, but like that's maybe a product of compassion going too far, but the limits of compassion. But like when we're talking about deporting people, like, so you might give the Republicans or MAGA a tick on abortion. Yes, we're going to end abortion, whatever. But then, like, when you're balancing every other piece of what the Bible tells you about how you should live your life, that's just one of it. And then on every other thing, like shred of decency, like decency's thrown out the window for Trump and his administration. Whereas for Democrats, they're still fighting for those principles that, you know, it's yeah, I don't agree with that notion that it's
You have to concede though, Andy, that all these blue states, they are pretty close to Sodom and Gomorrah. Like, as far as these people who are literally trying to live a Christian lifestyle, when they look at California, they look at these other places, it is, it is like the Wild West. Couldn't be more, off the rails in this way, like in terms of the sexual liberation, LGBT, IQ, HTMI, right? Like, I think there's all this stuff going on, right?
There's lots of things going on there, though. There's, there's
crime, the drugs, like all the,
No, but there's different things going on. Like when you look at communities that tend to be more religious, or at least state that they're more religious, they also tend to have different compositional makeups. Like they tend to be less cosmopolitan. They tend to be more regional. There's all of these different things at play, and their version of their self-characterization that they're religious, it might not be the same thing as being sincerely religious, like, or being, doing the work to be religious.
There's only one party that has trouble with answering, like, what is a woman, right? It's a cultural issue.
I think that in some ways almost, mischaracterizes it as well, though, because I think if you ask a Democrat to speak plainly about a question like that, the reason they won't answer it with this very definitive answer that I think they're often being prompted to give is because it is nuanced, and like they might be misguided in maybe being a bit too nuanced, and to the extent that they're refraining from giving a clear and obvious answer. But like at the same time, that comes from a place of compassion, right? And I think if you're,
it might have started like that, but I think when someone gets their rocks off on the power and the authority to police people, to censor people.
Yeah, of course. But you can't honestly say that if you ask me right now, which is the more Christian of the two parties, it's definitely not Donald Trump. No. It's definitely not the Republicans.
No.
So
it's not Donald Trump, but like you said,
or his administration. It's not his administration. It's not JD Vance, who is probably the most notable, kind of religious figure within the administration. And can we just like get off America and its interpretation of religion? Like America's got a very brutalized version of all of this stuff. This is like religion with American characteristics, and it's not.
Well, I only use it because we've inherited a lot of the American version of Christianity in Australia, in terms of like the megachurch culture and all that kind of stuff. That definitely is part of our
That's
landscape.
That's just because we don't have any historical cathedrals, and we've got lots of empty industrial estates.
Hello, Bella Vista. All right, yeah, and I was going on that rant about it being tough as a binary decision. I think it's on a more meta scale, like on a grander kind of view of this. It is tough too because we've both grappled with this idea. The reason, Andy, I believe that you are like, warming to the Christian idea and why people do in general, like a Jordan Peterson or whatever, is that you can understand the good, like the values at the core, like they're revolutionary. Like all the things that Christianity bring in a lot of ways are revolutionary, and it would solve a lot of the world's problems. But then you're left with this overwhelming, peculiarity that it doesn't work. Like even though the values are good, it doesn't work without the lie. You can't get people. Well, if it does work, we haven't found it out yet. We haven't found a way to adhere to, say, Christian values without all the other stuff that comes with it.
I think you'll find a lot of people who would say that they're Christian, or like maybe whether they say they're Christian, but people who go to church on a regular basis. I think you would say some ungodly high proportion of that cohort don't believe it. Like I think there's a lot of people who go because it's their families go, their partner forces them to, or they were.
What are you trying
maybe
to say,
both.
Andy?
Well, I think it's this thing where they're quiet about it because they realize, these are my people. Like I might not believe the lie, but like, hey, like it's a bit like still enjoying like the idea. Like why? Maybe to think of a different way. Why do adults, grown adults, like get dressed up as Santa, like at Christmas, like office Christmas parties? Like so, not even to indulge kids, but like, why is there even like why do we acknowledge Santa at all as adults? Like, because it's fun. It's fucking part of the it's like the ritual of Christmas. Why do we even celebrate Christmas at all?
But look, you're talking. Okay, I get it. But you're talking about the main difference there is that Christmas is a festival, or there's many festivals.
It's meant to be religious.
Well, no, but there are many cultural festivals that are about celebration or some kind of like seasonal passing or whatever it is. But religion's purpose at its
religion
core,
is a festival of life. It's about how to live your life.
I think
and not live your life.
The nihilistic or the pessimistic view on religion is a necessary means of controlling mass populations in an urban environment, right? Within an empire.
Well, that's the very, that's the very Big Brother sort of, or, Machiavellian kind of take on it.
It's been very effective at doing that, not to provide a big celebration,
So the real, like you mentioned before that, I'm what did you say that my appeal to it is? What did you say was the reason why I was attracted to it?
Well, this idea that like you can understand that the values that religion is bringing are overwhelmingly positive, like have a positive influence on society. And if everyone was actually following that, and they can't because everyone's human and flawed.
Okay, all right. So I think for me, what it actually possibly more is like religion is like. Have you ever heard of like oobleck before?
No.
So it's like it's basically like cornstarch and water, right? And it's when you poke it really slowly, it behaves exactly like a liquid, right? And it fully absorbs you, and it kind of, you can put your hand in it just like you would any like quicksand kind of thing. But if you punch it really like solidly, it's like a solid, like it's like a brick, and you can't penetrate it. And I think that's kind of like what religion's like. So it's just this thing which like kind of locks in societal norms and values, and it just shields society as a whole from like rapid change. And it's actually really effective at preserving, like it's like the ultimate conservative like piece of architecture in our culture, right? And I think in normal times, like we can penetrate it, like we can get in and we can kind of say, oh, that's bullshit, what are they doing over there? But like, I don't know, like I kind of feel like there's a really good role for it to play to protect us from those shocks.
I agree. I agree. And you almost had me at penetration because that's probably a triggering word. But what I would say is that you can acknowledge that the ethical side of like the values-driven side of a lot of religions, of how to live a good life, if you follow the doctrine, and we can't ultimately do that to its core because we're human and we're flawed. But if you did, you'd live a better life and your community would prosper. But when you think about how this organically happened, where it's like, some pastor or clergy saying, trust me because God spoke to me. There's this guy behind the curtain that I can't show you, but you have to believe me that he's God, and now he's telling me what to tell you. Because at the heart of every religion, it's kind of what it is.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Like,
I accept that.
When you truly accept that, because that's exactly how it happened, right? That's someone who had a silver tongue said, I went behind the bush, I got the instruction, and now, it's like, I'm not bossing you around. God's telling you to do this, right? Like that at the core is what every religion is doing. And yes, there are positive outcomes, there are stuff, but when you build something on a lie.
But do you know what I'm thinking about? Like, can't this just be like that episode of The Simpsons where, like, it turns out Principal Skinner isn't actually Principal Skinner? Like, he's
he was
like
the original Don Draper.
He's like this imposter who, like during Vietnam, like
there's literally the plot line to Don Draper in Mad Men.
Yeah, well, The Simpsons came first. Simpsons did it. So yeah, he inhabited the figure, whatever. But, of course, because like everything in a Simpsons episode has to snap back to like as though nothing ever happened, there's a court order that the judge rules that we must all forget this ever happened. And
his legal name is now Skinner.
And I kind of feel like we need that, where it's like,
amnesty,
we all just collectively know, like, we don't believe in this stuff, but let's just pretend that we do for here on eternity.
It doesn't work when you know it's a trick. It's the placebo effect, right? This is why it's so horrible. Like when you've gone through a process like I have of losing a religion, you might want it back, but you can't have it back anymore. Like it's Plato's cave, right? Like you've seen the shadows on the wall. You managed to free yourself from the shackles. You realize they're shadows, they're not reality, and you can see outside, but you can never go back to believing the shadows are real anymore, right? And it's sad because the people in there are happy, and you try to convince those people, and they end up murdering Plato, right?
I think the only exception I would give, where I would add a bit more nuance, is, and we talked about this in some recent episodes, I can't remember which one, but it's this idea that, yeah, like if religion to you is that superficial kind of like, this is the description of like what God is and, you know, what you're supposed to do, and, you know, do you believe that or do you not believe that? Yeah, okay. But like, I think increasingly there's more subtle ways of inferring what like a religious value system is, right? It might not be the supernatural aspects of it. It might not actually be even contingent on your belief in God per se. It might be your belief in a value system. It might be your belief, your faith that a particular set of rules of living your life are good for you ultimately, such that you're willing to adopt the value system of a religion, a traditional religion, because you think it's good for your life and your family and your community, right? Yeah. And that's an evolved version, right? That's different to professing faith in
but isn't that the rub though?
In God, but like,
isn't it the rub that like, you know, like say this was the diet, right? Like, say everybody knows, most people know, like 80%, 85% of the population know what you need to do to get healthy and stay in a healthy weight range, right? You know, why don't you do it, right? And
some people do.
Some people do. But this is the equivalent of saying like someone is saying you need to do these things, right? And I'm telling you to do them, otherwise you will go to hell. And so there's this like motivation thing around like, and that's the hard realization sometimes, like, is say like the new atheists, like a Richard Dawkins and all these kind of people, should they have put more effort into what comes after the end of religion? Like, because it's too idealistic to say, hey, you can study ethics, you can form these really secular views of what it means to live a good life, while knowing that human nature makes it near impossible to do that without some of the scaffolding that religion brings.
It's too uncompelling a message to say to the masses, hey, this thing, like, actually turns out like this, you know, conservative Catholicism was actually really good for us. So, you know, we're just going to like, even though we don't believe it anymore, we're just going to pretend we do and act as though we do. Like, that's not going to work, right? People are not going to buy that. People are not going to adhere to that. So, and indeed, as to the earlier point, even Catholics don't adhere to it, right? So I think that's sure, that 100%, right? So I'm not challenging that. The only thing I would say though is that aspirationally, as an individual, maybe it is like the diet. It is the realization that, okay, maybe that diet thing was actually good, right? And to extend the diet analogy, you know, it's like you have this, you lose this faith in, like, we had a conversation recently about how dietitians or people who advise you on what you should and shouldn't eat don't really know much. Like, their expertise is poor, right? It's like, all right, so I'm not going to believe anything they've got to say anymore, right? And so you just throw out every bit of like health, like dietary advice, and then you just like eat out on like junk food like every day. And then it turns out you get like all these problems. And it's like, actually, maybe we need to go back to that kind of, maybe there's something in it after all, right?
Yeah. I get you.
And I think that's what it, and because a lot of the rules of religion aren't purely because someone made it up, right? Some of these rules are emergent, right? They've emerged over thousands of years of like how to build successful societies, right? So maybe it's just picking out that maybe that whole like no sex before marriage thing like sounds antiquated, but maybe there's actually like a functional like utility to that, right?
It's called babies. No, but like even in that diet thing, right? Like I think what I'm pointing out too, which I know you're not challenging, is the motivation is not like entirely intrinsic to lose weight and to look after yourself. If you're honest with most people, do that in response to an external stimuli that says, "Hey, honey, you're getting fat," you know, like or seeing other things. Like, I mean, we can't rely on ourselves to do this stuff. And I think what's happening in the US and politics is a great example of that. Like, shouldn't it be enough without religion, idealistically, to say, hey, look at Trump, look at the way he's acting, look at the way he's treating people. This is wrong. You know it's wrong. And you shouldn't have to have someone tell you to do it. You should do what's right. But no, of course, that's not going to work. Like even the Christians are having trouble fighting back against him, right? Like, so that's what I mean, that I get torn behind that, because sometimes, you know, like what works, and doesn't, and then this idea of like my central challenge, where if it's based on a lie, then it's a lie and it's not worth following. But then if that's the only way to get the outcome, we're back to quite a quandary here, aren't we?
I just think there's not a true Christian in the world who could possibly back Trump. Wouldn't it be funny if like JD Vance was they elected Pope? They were like, how can we troll Trump? It's like
it would be amazing, because he would take that role. He'd be like, oh yes,
can you imagine the havoc
better career
he'd
move?
cause?
I'm sorry, I've got to look after me, Donald. I'm going for the popehood. I hope you'll get a reference call between 2 and 4 next Tuesday. You know.
Do you remember? You know, when Trump put up his awkward poster board thing, was the Vatican on the list of tariffs?
No, he has a lot of respect for the Vatican and the Pope, apparently.
Yeah, but it doesn't mean that he wouldn't slap at least a 10% tariff on them.
Yeah, well, fair is fair. I mean, China could be, you know, using the Vatican to parlay their goods.
The irony of the Vatican being a backdoor export front for Italy.
Backdoor, it's so good.